Hello, everybody. This is Alan Crone, CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I am so excited because today I'm coming to you with the first installment of our new feature called Ask Alan. As advertised, this is a show where I will answer any question that you send me. I don't claim that the answer is right or wrong, but it's my answer. And so we've already gotten some questions from folks that have received our emails or seen our posts online and social media, and they have sent me actual questions, and I'll hold some of the questions here in my hand. If they weren't actual questions, could I do this? No, for you David Letterman fans out there. That's an old Letterman bit, but I'm going to select some of these questions. We're not going to read all of them. We're not going to do all of them. We're going to save some for another time. And if you don't like these questions, if you think these are too softball or boring, then you only have yourself to blame. Send some questions in and ask Alan, and we'll answer them in future broadcasts. So let's get right to it. I'm going to start with a non-legal question first. Who is your favorite non-cast member on Seinfeld? I got that question from Beth. Beth, that's a great question. There are lots of great characters on Seinfeld. And I'm guessing when you say non-cast member, I can't pick one of the big four. I can't pick Jerry or George, Elaine, or Kramer. So I've given this lots of thought. We had a little bit of debate here in the office about it. And I think today, I'm going to have to go with George's father, Mr. Costanza, mainly because the great Jerry Stiller, who portrayed him, died recently. And so I got to give a shout out to Jerry Stiller, one of the great comic actors, stand-up comedians, member of Stilla and Mira comedy team. And he just brings that so much to that character and the show, and if you watch some of the retrospectives on the Seinfeld show, they all the cast members look to Jerry as a role model, and he was always a consummate professional and was just a brilliant guy. Plus the character itself is so layered, and you can understand where George came from. And of course, without Mr. Costanza, we wouldn't have Festivus, we wouldn't have Serenity Now, we wouldn't have the Bro or the Manzier. So I have to say that it's Mr. Costanza, George Costanza's father, and just a great character, one of the great television characters of all time. Although, you know, there were votes in the office for the Soup Nazi. I think that's a little bit of chalk, personally. I tell you, another favorite of mine is the Maestro. Mainly because many people would say that I secretly want everyone to call me Maestro, and that's probably not too far from the truth. Lots and lots of great characters. I think that's what made Seinfeld such a great show, was the variety of characters, the richness of characters, and you can watch any Seinfeld show for about 2 or 3 minutes and you know exactly what it's about. And they're like the I Love Lucy show. You can watch them now, and you'll probably be able to watch them 20 or 30 years from now. They're timeless. So that's my answer to that question, Beth. Next is what is better looking, or should I say, who is better looking? Brian Stevens with or without a beard? And that question comes from the great Brian Stevens, one of the principals at CASA here in town, a fixture in local politics and Memphis business. Brian, I think hands down, beard. You look great with a beard. You look very distinguished. Not that you don't look good without the beard, but you got to stay with the beard. It's your look, it's your trademark. I wouldn't change a thing. You look marvelous. Stay with it. All right, now to a legal question. This is a good timely legal question. It comes from Sandra. When and how do I request the PP loan to be forgiven? That is a great question, and I want to take a couple of minutes to answer it. Um, first thing you should do when you're dealing with PPP loans is you should stay in close contact with your banker. I would call in and check in with my banker once or twice during this 8-week period just to let them know how you're doing. If you're going to do something that's a little out of the ordinary, if you can do anything other than pay payroll with it, I would talk it over with your banker, because the banks are going to have a lot of leeway in determining what is and what isn't forgiven. And if they're on your side, I think that's going to be very, very helpful. Second part of this question is, my understanding is you're going to wait until your 8 weeks are up, and then you can begin that dialogue with your bank. Now, there's a grace period, I believe it's between now and November before those have to be paid back. But I would start that dialogue with your bank as soon as that loan period is over. Now, what's going to be interesting is the Small Business Administration and the Department of Treasury have yet to issue guidelines on repayment and forgiveness, et cetera. I've said from the very beginning, I think it's going to be harder to get these loans forgiven than it was to get them in the first place. And it was pretty difficult to get them in the first place. Because there's going to be some pressure on the Department of the Treasury Department, and by the mainly the Treasury Department, to get some of this money back so that it is not as much of a drain on the Treasury of the United States as it would be if they paid all the money out. I think your biggest ally here is going to be the banks. And I don't want to speak for the banks, but I think most of them would rather not have a huge portfolio of 1% loans that they're going to have to take out over the next 2 to 4 years. So you want to stay in close contact with your bank. You want to be conservative. I would be real conservative on what I spent the money on. I have a PPP loan. I'm spending it on payroll and probably nothing else. And if I have money left over, I'm probably going to give that back in terms of repayment early, in hopes that that will help me with my forgiveness application down the road. Now, I've learned that the U.S. Treasury Department through the IRS has issued a statement that they consider the expenses you pay with the PPP loan to be not deductible if you get loan forgiveness. Now, I think that's a little tricky, and I'm a little upset with the IRS for that, because the statute which created this program said that the loan forgiveness would not be taxable. Ordinarily, if you take out a loan and the bank forgives your loan, or whoever loaned you the money forgives the loan, that's a taxable event. That's income. That's like somebody handing you money. Well, in order to encourage people to take out these loans, the Congress of the United States and the statute said that the loan forgiveness was not going to be taxable. All right. I'm not a math whiz, but it's hard for me to logically deal with that statute and a statement by the IRS where they say that if you use those loan proceeds, forgivable loan proceeds, to pay for an expense that would ordinarily be deductible, that because you use this money, it's not deductible anymore. That seems to me to be a backdoor way of making that money taxable. Because if you can't deduct it, if you can't deduct the expense that the loan went to pay for, that kind of by default makes that money taxable. So more on that later. I think my colleague, Wes Laughlin, who's our tax guy here in the office, he put me onto this issue, and he thinks that the Congress will address this in the next, in one of these subsequent stimulus packages. So we'll just have to see. So that's my answer on that, is I would stay in close contact with your bank. And as soon as they will allow you, I think your books will have to be closed on the proceeds of your loan, that 8-week period. And then the bank is probably going to want to see some documents and records to document how you use the proceeds. And they may want to look at other financial documents as well. And there'll be a process, and hopefully the SBA and the Department of Treasury will be putting out that guidance very, very soon. So Sandra, I hope that answers your question, and I appreciate your question very much. All All right, and so penultimately, the second to last question is from my sister Maggie, who's our intake director here at the Crone Law Firm. She says, do you prefer the U.S. or UK version of The Office? That's tough to say because the UK version was so short. There were only 2 or 3 seasons of the UK version versus many, many seasons of the US version. I would say that I prefer Ricky Gervais over Steve Carell, but overall I prefer the U.S. Office. I think because I relate more to the U.S. culture and I identify more with U.S. office culture than I do UK. If you haven't seen if you're an Office fan and you haven't seen the UK version, you really owe it to yourself to stream that and maybe binge that. If it's going to rain this weekend, that'd be a great activity. Because as I say, it's only 2 or 3 seasons long. You'll recognize some of the seasons, some of the shows from the first season of the U.S. Office. You'll recognize those, and they have a little bit of a different spin on them. I also think that the producers of the U.S. version kind of went to school on what the UK version did and improved upon certain things and certain relationships between the characters, etc. But in my opinion, it's not by much. I think both are excellent, but I'd have to give the nod to the U.S. version of The Office. And then the last question is from Jim and Dottie and Bartlett, and they ask, when can I start to see my kids and grandkids without masks, go out to eat, and watch live sports again? Well, I don't know. I certainly identify with that, and I certainly feel your pain. Hopefully, we're going to be going to phase 2 here in Memphis, Shelby County pretty soon, which will allow bigger gatherings and more folks eating out. I think that you could certainly do those things now. If you're older than 65, I think you still want to really carefully consider how much you go out in public. NASCAR, if you consider that sports, they're about to start their season. I hear golf is not too far away. And right now, you can watch live in the mornings Korean baseball, which is great if you're desperate to watch baseball, because it is baseball and it's Korean baseball. And it's baseball if you want to watch baseball. There are bats, there are balls, there are bases, there are umpires, 9 players to a team, lots and lots of positive comparisons to American baseball, except for the quality. It is not major league caliber baseball, but it is baseball, so you can watch that now. And so I'm hopeful that as we go along here, as the weeks and days progress, that we're going to be getting to the end of this. If nothing else, that we'll be understanding better how to deal with this virus, how to live with this virus, how to get back to our lives with as little disruption as possible. And then hopefully at some point they find a cure or a vaccine and we can move on completely. But my advice is to embrace the good things that this brings us. And one of those great things is a new perspective and innovation and closeness with our families. At least that's what I've gotten out of it. And so I just encourage you to look at the glass half full, look on the silver lining of all of this, and take advantage of what good you can find in this circumstance rather than focusing on the bad. So that is the first ever episode of Ask Alan. It was good, I think, but it can be better. And one way that can be better is for you to send in questions. Help me with the content by sending in questions. And I will ask me a question and I will answer it. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great day, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to go out there and get some justice. Thank you.